From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. Andrew with you once again, joined as always by my co-host Derek, aka D3. Derek, basketball gaming in 2026 may not be everything that everyone wants it to be, but in other ways, the virtual hardwood definitely remains a blast. Naturally, we have some thoughts to share here, so please tip us off.
Yeah, this episode is centered around what surprises us most about basketball gaming today, both positives and negatives. The community also weighed in. We will get to those responses later in the show. So, Andrew, we've been playing basketball video games for decades. We were alive when 8-bit games were all the craze and continue to play games today with the newest tech. And we have witnessed countless changes, for better and for worse, in the basketball gaming space. I think it makes sense to talk about what has surprised us the most in a positive way. And I'll kick this off. So it surprises me that the NBA 2K series has this much content. I never thought we would see a video game that had multiple past eras to choose from, countless classic teams and all-time teams, the G League represented, and the WNBA, all while having a card collecting mode, career mode, season and franchise options, blacktop, and more. There's a negative component to this related to some of the content being rushed, but I never thought we would see this much content in a basketball video game. Furthermore, the game has a jersey, court, arena, and Dorna creator. You can copy and paste players into different rosters using the player DNA feature and have countless editing options for the players. While I know 2K has cornered the market as it relates to basketball video games, the amount of content they have surprises me. I never thought I would see this much in a game, Andrew.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that's in games these days, or in NBA 2K these days, I should say, because that is the only game coming out every year, unfortunately, kind of previewing one of the negatives here, I know, but we talked about this stuff for years. Wouldn't it be cool to see, retro teams, retro season rosters, be able to wind back the clock, play from an earlier point in time, have the WNBA. People talked about either having a spin-off WNBA game or having WNBA content in the game. EuroLeague, we've had that in the past. All this bonus content we've had. Yeah, that really is surprising, some of the stuff we've seen. The amount of it, like you say, hasn't all been done well, unfortunately, but certainly has been a wealth of content.
I think that's 2K's biggest strength right now. They have something for everybody as long as the consumer likes the base gameplay. They have stuff for online. They have stuff for offline. They have editing features. They have so much in there. And I think that they have the most content in sports video game history. And they outdo the football series, Madden, they outdo MLB The Show, etc. Just so much is in the 2K series.
And we were pretty excited back in the day when we got the all-decade teams, right? In NBA Live 2000, some previous games did have legends as well, whether they were hidden and unlockable or right out there, like the NBA Action Series. Huge when the legends came to NBA Live 2000, and then 2K got them as well. But yeah, just how far they've taken it. The array of modes as well, like you said, if you want that career experience, for so many years there, people were using a franchise mode, player locking, having that makeshift career experience. Now we have the career modes. If you want that fantasy teams mode, it's tied to microtransactions, obviously, but you have my team. You've still got my NBA. Like you said, there's something for everyone.
Yeah, see, with NBA 2K26, for example, my brothers and I do not like the head-to-head experience with the game. We don't think the game is balanced appropriately for that. But we do like the co-op experience, and we have many different ways to play co-op. For example, right now we have a Fantasy Draft WNBA season that we're playing, and my brother and I play Legends versus the CPU for the NBA portion. So we are able to get our fix because of the amount of content that is in the game.
And I do have to say, Derek, it was kind of a surprise to me that my NBA Eras wasn't just a one and done, because we have seen some great modes in NBA 2K that were just one and done, but they have brought it back year after year. It does seem to be the new approach to the franchise experience in NBA 2K. They've been licensing new players. They've added the Steph era. since the first iteration of My NBA Eras, so they are adding to it. It doesn't appear to be going anywhere, like the Jordan Challenge being a one-off, Mamba Moments being a one-off. They made sense, of course. I was kind of surprised to see them, to be honest, because at one point in time, I didn't think we were ever going to see any modes added that didn't make money. My NBA Eras doesn't have recurrent revenue, but it is building upon a core mode. I didn't think they were going to bring back things like the Jordan Challenge. They did, as one-offs, admittedly, still a pleasant surprise. But the fact that they haven't gotten rid of My NBA Eras, that they have built on it, added more content as they've been licensing new players, shout out to Kenny Gaddison for helping out with that, of course, I'm kind of surprised because we have seen great modes and features come and go.
Yeah, and see, that's where we differ. I'm not surprised that it's continued to be in each game. And the reason is because you don't go through the effort to get that many licenses, that many permissions, and put that much money into a feature like this and then not bring it back. Fair. So my opinion is you put all of that work in and you're going to bring it back for each game. I'm glad it's in there, right? Like I stated, it is rushed. That is not surprising to me. But we've been editing it. The community's been editing it, editing the teams they want to use or full rosters, etc. But yeah, I like the fact that it's in the game.
So the first positive that I'll bring up, Derek, is the accessibility to a wealth of basketball games from the history of the genre. There's a lot of progress has been made there. Emulation, obviously. Emulators have come such a long way. How many games can successfully be emulated now? Performance is exceptional. You do need a better PC if you are emulating PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, for example, even PlayStation 2, but if you have a decent gaming PC, you can emulate those games superbly. They run as they should, they resemble the original hardware, performance is great, it's awesome. Also, as far as emulating old PCs, you've got solutions like DOSBox, Nglide wrappers, other ways to get old games to run. There's solutions for macOS and Linux. I'm not as familiar with them, but I know they exist. The latest consoles have retained backwards compatibility. Better if you have the version with the optical disk drive, obviously, but you can still play older games on newer hardware. You don't have to rely on the latest game if you don't enjoy it. Obviously, a lot of people do. Me, not so much. But retro gaming has become a viable and accessible alternative.
How great are ROMs and emulators? Shout out to all the developers out there, all the people that created those amazing emulators. RPCS3 for PlayStation 3, XMU for Xbox, Xenia, I know it's a little far behind, but hey, it is an Xbox 360 emulator. SNES 9X. I could go on and on. I'm just so impressed with the people that make these emulators, and they have made millions of gamers that much happier. They've helped people create memories with these games. They made these games so accessible. And then you can share those experiences with people from around the world using an application like Parsec, which we just used today, Andrew. It was you, me, and Kid Cash. We played NBA Live 10. And then we also played the Super NES emulator, played NBA Live 96, and it was you, me, Kid Cash, and WizCard Rush, all on the same team using the Bulls. We created Michael Jordan, so he was on there, and we just had an absolute blast. Just the access is absolutely crazy to me, and we just have unlimited options as far as what we can play. 4
of us, 4 different places in the world, one of us on the opposite side of the world. Yeah, who would have thought it? That is absolutely surprising. Parsec surprised us from the very first session we had with it, how well it worked. And you mentioned the people working on the emulators, and there's actually been a recent update to the ZSNES or ZSNES emulator, one of the first Super Nintendo emulators. I have to check it out. I'm not sure exactly what's gone into it. I did see it pop up in my feed the other day that there's been a big update to this very old emulator out of nowhere, so I will have to check that out. But to that point, people are still working on it, finding ways to make emulation and retro gaming even better in 2026.
The first emulator I ever used, Andrew, was Nesticle, which was an NES emulator, and the desktop icon was Nesticles, but with a T.
Yes.
And it was shocking, right? But that emulator worked awesome, and I remember playing some classic games on it like Dragon Warrior and whatnot, and we had that in the 90s, right? So emulators and ROMs are not new, but the library of games and, the ability to play all of these different consoles, it still just blows my mind.
And of course, PlayStation 4, that emulation is coming along, some progress being made there. And the other great thing about this, Derek, modding. People can actually mod a lot of games that we couldn't mod because they're on consoles. Now that they're being emulated on PC, lots of cool possibilities moving forward.
Yeah, look at John Z1's NBA Jam Legends on Fire Edition mods.
Exactly.
Incredible. My next positive is the height of technology. It blows my mind. I am super surprised by it. It's the height of recording, the height of editing, and the ability to share. We have many applications now that can handle gameplay recording and streaming, a couple of which are free, like OBS. These applications have built-in features that allow you to stream to different platforms, and some applications like Action that allow you to stream on multiple platforms at the same time. So your stream is going out to all of these different places and getting views from different places and interactions. Editing software is also incredibly accessible with many free editors that can do the trick, something like OpenShot, which is just like a free open source application, and you can throw clips in there and have transition screens and make highlight reels and blah, blah, blah. Like, I am just super surprised at how fast technology moved and just the quality that we can record and share with. Yeah, good stuff all around there.
We've come a long way since everybody was using Fraps, and usually a pirated version of Fraps at that, in lower quality, and built-in recording technology as well in consoles. I know it's not always great, maybe at 30 FPS on the 8th generation consoles, but we've had progress there. It's been really cool to see, because a lot of stuff happened, through our decades of gaming, Derek, basketball and otherwise, really cool things that have given us some great memories, but we can't share them. You've got to take our word for it.
Yeah, and I think that's special too, right? There's a lot of memories from playing a game like NBA Live 2000 PC, where my brothers and I were huddled up on stools in front of a CRT monitor and, battling it out on a fantasy draft season and whatnot. Like, we talk about those days, right? We talk about those performances and those performances playing those old games and, the video game legends. But, that's all between us and there's no footage of it, but we know about it. And that's pretty special. But yeah, it would have been cool to record some of that footage and, be able to look back on it today.
Did you ever record any gameplay on VHS when you had a VCR hooked up?
We did, yeah. So I talked about this hundreds of episodes ago, actually.
That's right, yes.
Shows how long we've been recording. So with the original NBA 2K, actually, we had it for Dreamcast. We had that whole VCR set up where we were able to record the gameplay. And basically, I put together highlight reels back then on the original NBA 2K, kind of like what you see for me for my gameplay videos that I put up on YouTube today. And I was just blown away by the graphics on the original NBA 2K. I was like, I don't think it can get any better than this. I was wrong. But, I thought the game looked amazing. And you know what? I still think it looks good today.
Yeah, we had our ways back in the day, but a lot easier these days, for sure. So the next one that I'll bring up, kind of building on the previous point, obviously, but the rise in interest in retro basketball gaming. We share our footage a lot, Derek, when we go back and play these games. And as you know, a lot of people will say to us, hey, that looks like fun. I'd like to give that a try. More people are going back in time, playing those classics, revisiting those old favorites, making new memories, as we do. I like to think that we've helped the community do that. And to that point, there's less stigma than there used to be. There is some stigma still there. It's there and it's loud, but it's becoming less weird to go back and play these games. I'm not saying we invented retro gaming, Derek, obviously. Retro gaming has been there for other genres, but I think there's less stigma when it comes to basketball and sports games these days, and that's great to see. Again, that's leading to new opportunities, renewed interest in modding old favorites, new mods, like John Z1's mods for NBA Jam 1 Fire Edition. There's new discoveries about classic games. People have the knowledge to do more with modding those games, pulling them apart, seeing how they worked. You look at Carolus explaining NBA 2K13's blocking issue in our Discord, Murat discovering the way that Power Freestyle Superstars works from a technical standpoint and talking about exactly how that worked as far as giving us the advantage. The widescreen fixes. Yeah, the stigma is going from retro basketball gaming. More people are getting into it. I'm pleasantly surprised. I love to see it.
Yeah, I mean, look at the reaction on social media to some of this retro footage. For example, NBA Live 95 Super NES, I posted 5-player cooperative highlights. This game came out over 30 years ago, Andrew. And I'm not a big account on Twitter either. I have around 1,300 followers. And this had 42,000 views and 565 likes, and just people in the comments reminiscing about this game and saying, man, I'd love to play this and all of this stuff. I posted NBA 2K11 PS2 highlights, not even the best version of that game, which was on PS3 and Xbox 360 and PC. And it got 16K views, 31K views on my NBA Live 10 PS3 NLSC co-op footage when you and I took on the Pacers and we were using the Hawks. 397 likes and just people talking about how great the atmosphere is in that game. And then most recently I posted NBA Live 2000 PC highlights of Vince Carter just throwing it down. It's only about 6 or 7 highlights. 23,000 views, Andrew, 405 likes, a bunch of retweets, a bunch of bookmarks, a bunch of people reminiscing about this game and just loving the highlights. So yeah, this renewed interest in retro gaming is surprising to me, especially in 2026. But how awesome is it? I love it.
Yeah, those are getting great reactions whenever we share that footage. Sharing it across our social media platforms, people loving the footage. Gets them reminiscing, gets them playing these games. Again, the stigma seems to be going, which it should. We should enjoy what we play, and a lot of people do enjoy the latest game. You enjoy 2K26 more than me to that point, but people are playing these older games, having a blast, realizing you don't have to leave them in the past. Not everyone can go back, not everybody has that predisposition for retro gaming. I know that I am kind of born to be a retro gamer, got my start playing on a Mattel Intellivision, Derek. You know, really old tech in the 80s, but more and more people are going back. Again, love to see it. And the final positive that I'll bring up here is the indie scene. And it's not perfect. It's not giving us the competition that we want, Derek. But there are some people, small studios, small teams of 1 or 2 people, developing some great retro-style games. Also appealing to nostalgia, much like retro gaming, obviously. They're stepping up to a certain extent where AAA studios are refusing to compete. That surprises me because, you know, you've got a company like EA Sports, has all these resources, and they don't want to compete, and then you've got these smaller developers saying, hey, I'll try and make a basketball video game. You know, I think that's kind of cool. You know, there's still some snobbery there, some people saying, oh, primitive graphics, who wants to play this? But you and I have had a blast with Basketball Classics, we're looking forward to Super Basketball Classics, The Dunkers, that's a very intriguing game, Hoopland, you know, NBA The Run, you know, the only NBA licensed indie small studio game. That is unfortunate, but there's some other good stuff happening with these really cool retro-style indie games. They're not for everyone, but I think they're worth checking out. I am pleasantly surprised to see people throwing their hat into the ring, trying to make basketball games. You know, I said when Basketball Classics was made, it's the game that I didn't know I wanted. So yeah, I was very happily surprised by that at the time. I think that's kind of a positive. There are positives to the indie basketball gaming scene.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that we have some people out there in that scene making basketball games, right? In fact, there's not enough, and that's going to be my first surprise. That's a negative, and we're going to get into that in a moment. But shout out to Namo Gamo, the creators of Basketball Classics and Super Basketball Classics, which we can't wait to get our hands on. Shout out to Play by Play Studios, creators of NBA The Run. I've already played that game for like 6 to 8 hours now, Andrew, between 3 different play tests. Obviously, there's some interest there on my end, hoping they have a successful launch. Hopefully, they listen to us and others who are asking for offline modes, couch play, etc. But I like seeing them in the space and seeing what they're doing with this game and what inspired them to create this game. Creator of Hoopland, just really impressed by him, all the depth he put into that game. You know, it's a ode to the 16-bit era of video games. It's definitely a tribute to that era, but the game just has so much depth. So, yes, super impressed by all of those developers.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, me-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
So, Andrew, let's get into the stuff that surprises us, but in a negative way. And I'm going to go down my list, and Andrew will react to what I state because our lists are very similar. So we'll just have a conversation about it that way. So number one is not enough games in the space. I am surprised at the lack of basketball video games there are, whether it be AAA or indie. The sport is more global than ever, Andrew, and the technology is robust and accessible. We are living in an age where anybody can download applications like Unreal Engine, Unity, Godot, etc., and take classes or tutorials, some of which are free. Much of my life as a teenager and young adult, we had many options in both the sim and arcade spaces as far as basketball games go. The NBA Live series, NBA in the Zone, the Shootout series, NBA 2K starting with Fast Break 98, which was developed by Visual Concepts, followed by NBA 2K, which was released in 1999. NBA ESPN Tonight, NBA Starting 5, NBA Inside Drive, NBA Hang Time, NBA Street, NBA Ballers, NBA Jam, etc., etc., etc. I could go on and on. And even when you go back to 8-bit and 16-bit, just countless options to choose from. Now, it feels like the space is completely compromised, where AAA companies do not dare or care to enter it. There are also very few indie developers that have taken a stab at making basketball video games. Saber Interactive with Playgrounds is one example, and Play-by-Play Studios with NBA The Run is the most recent. And then obviously we have the games like Basketball Classics and Hoopland, but those are really the only truly notable ones. But why are there not more? I'm also surprised at the lack of attempts at making basketball games without the NBA license. But yeah, that's a negative for me. I am surprised that in 2026, we have so few basketball video games being made.
Totally agreed. I mean, I do like that we are seeing these indie games, obviously, but generally speaking, not enough competition. And it's kind of the opposite of the My NBA era's stuff. Whereas if you told us back in the 90s, this is what you can expect, we'd be like, wow, really? And that was a huge surprise, a positive surprise. Whereas if you told us back in the 90s, hey, your options are going to be whittled down to one. All these extra games, these alternatives that you're enjoying, you're not going to have them. We'd be like, that sucks. Because we enjoyed having those alternatives. Even if you did have a preferred brand, like I did with NBA Live, you still wanted to see those other options. You certainly didn't mind having those other options on the market. I hate that we've lost that. You know, at this point, I'm not too surprised whenever EA Sports fails to bring back NBA Live. I've kind of given up hope there, as I've talked about on previous shows. I'm still disappointed, of course. I wish it wasn't the case. It's not as surprising. Their refusal to get back into the space with a college basketball game, when they pulled the plug on that after 2K made those deals with schools, I'm not totally shocked that they didn't want to make a game without that exclusive license that's going to shut out competition. Not totally shocked, Eric, but still a little surprised. Certainly disappointed once again. I guess I gave them a little bit more credit than I should have. The fact that I haven't brought back NBA Jam or NBA Street, games that don't directly compete with NBA 2K, they offer that alternative experience. They were very well received. You know, even as NBA Live struggled, NBA Jam was well received. NBA Street, well received. The fact that they haven't brought that back, again, not totally shocking, but still a negative surprise. You know, going back to years ago, us growing up with all those alternatives, it's a bummer.
The next negative surprise that I want to bring up is that I'm surprised that microtransactions have taken center stage and have not been contested more. When I say contested more, I mean the legality of them. I didn't picture a world, Andrew, where so many people would drop hundreds and often thousands on games during their life cycle. Furthermore, I never imagined a world where people would do this on games where the servers go offline after a couple of years and they lose everything they had bought. When I was younger, I never pictured that the gaming space could become this greedy and this toxic.
It feels like we've lost the war on these practices. You know, we pushed back so hard on DLC back in the day. The whole horse armor meme back in the day, it seemed like we were making some progress. We were pushing back. We were fighting for our rights as consumers. But you're right, we don't push back on that from a legal standpoint or even just a critical standpoint. People defend microtransactions, grinding, lousy pre-order bonuses, bad business practices, lack of fairness to the gamers, on top of shutting down constructive criticism, shutting down valid opinions, too much toxic positivity. Yeah, I'm really dismayed by that we don't push back harder on those issues.
Yeah, I also want to point out that the people that defend the practices are very few and far in between. It's the minority. The majority of people are like, I hate this, right? I hate the fact that I feel like I have to spend money on this game, but they still do, right? They don't want to spend money over the top of the game's original purchase amount, but the game kind of, forces them into it, basically. If they want to, progress in the modes they want to play, if they want to avoid the grind, all of that stuff. I think that people aren't vocal enough about their displeasure with it. That bothers me.
And the boycotts, there's no real boycotts, like people saying, okay, well, I'm not going to buy the game. I'm not going to play that mode. You're not going to get money out of me. I just refuse to play that mode if that's what it's going to be like. People not taking the stand, not just speaking out, which is, of course, important, but not taking that stand. And, of course, whales kind of outvote us with their wallet.
I also believe that the main reason why people don't boycott because of these issues is because they feel like they shouldn't have to, right? It's a video game. They're buying the video game because they want to have fun. It's an escape for them. For some people, it's a way for them to connect with their friends. They're going to want to play a virtual basketball video game. So they feel like they shouldn't have to compromise that. They shouldn't have to compromise their fun, etc., because the company is greedy and forcing this stuff on them. The next negative is, I'm surprised that companies have been so intent on removing the offline experience from people's homes. It concerns me that the in-person experience is so undervalued today. How in-person family and friends experiences are taking a backseat to online play. Oftentimes, these online experiences are lonely and can be toxic. Sitting alone in a room with a headset on, and if not wearing a headset, sitting playing with random people around the world in silence, often getting frustrated with the game. I don't think online gaming is bad. I don't think it's always toxic. And I certainly think it should be a considered feature in basketball video games. But moving so far away from the family and friend piece, the face-to-face piece, the type of gaming that makes the most memories surprises me, and I find it concerning.
Yeah, that catering to the online scene, the so-called competitive scene, is definitely one of the surprising negatives. Growing up, the whole point of these games was to have fun, was to make them as realistic as possible. The sim games, obviously. The arcade games, obviously not so much. But the focus on the competitive scene, mechanics that don't lend themselves to realism. The fact that realism in a sim game, Derek, has come to be a dirty word, seen as a bad thing, and that these experiences are being removed completely from some games is really disappointing, obviously. But even when you have that offline experience still in games, they're affected by that focus on the online scene. The skill-based mechanics that are all about online play, so-called competitive play, that don't lend themselves to realism. The move to redefine hardcore and casual fans based on that, catering to that desire to only play online. Yeah, that's been really damaging to the genre. And yeah, once again, very disappointing.
In my opinion, it effectively separates family and friends at times. And that's troubling to me. I also think that it's pushing people online, not as much catering to people that want to play online. And there's a distinction there. And I think that some people feel forced to play online, especially with some of these games that are going online only. And I think that overall is a much lonelier experience than sitting around a TV with your friends, with your siblings, with your parents, etc., and enjoying games that way. It can be the best of both worlds, Andrew. You can have games that are really strong offline that give you that family, friend, local experience, or a more enjoyable solo experience, whether it be a single player mode, something that you can just get lost in where you don't have to deal with anything online, a toxic online community, etc. But then there can also be a place for that online play to connect with friends, to connect with random people if you so choose. But to say that, these games, are better off without those offline components and then pushing people to get online as opposed to having those face-to-face experiences at home, I'm not a fan of that.
And with the focus on the online scene, moving away from being this realistic sim, that's a big reason why I haven't enjoyed this generation, by and large, because I am primarily playing by myself against the CPU, Derek, and that hasn't been as fun of an experience for me. At this point, it feels like I'm going to go the whole generation without loving any NBA 2K games. I did like NBA 2K21 and NBA 2K23, as I've said before, but not loving it, not feeling enthusiastic about the next game, excited for the next game. I don't know if we're going to go back and play some of these games and feel differently about them. Obviously, I've had a change of heart about many 7th and 8th generation NBA Live and NBA 2K games, Derek. It may happen with this generation, but that has been one of my negative surprises as well, just how dismal this generation has been. Personally, for me, I know other people don't feel that way. Absolutely fine. I'm glad you're enjoying the games. I wish I could. But yeah, this generation for me has been a bust. And once again, that's been super disappointing.
The next negative is it surprises me that people don't record and share their footage more. On Xbox One and PS4, the internal recording allowed you to record at 720p and 30 FPS, but an update was later released for Xbox One that allowed 1080p recording, but still at 30 FPS. And PS4 was 720p at 30 FPS, but the PS4 Pro allowed 1080p at 30 FPS. The 30 FPS was a killer on those consoles, so it was a little more understandable the lack of shared footage at the time. I also find it incredibly puzzling that these consoles were released with 30 FPS recording and initially with 720p recording as well. Don't you want people to show footage of the games on your console? Don't you want people to be encouraged to share that footage because it promotes your consoles and promotes the games? Just always puzzled me. But with PS5, Andrew, and Xbox Series consoles, they record and export at 1080p 60 FPS, which is still the gold standard for video quality. However, you rarely see people post footage on forums like the NLSC or Operation Sports and on other platforms like YouTube and Twitter. It is still not as common as I thought it would be. I feel like we saw far more sharing during the PS3 gen days on forums. I am thinking that part of the reason that sharing isn't that common is because the internet has gotten so big that people feel like, what's the point? Right? And yeah, this really surprises me because I expected that in 2026, with the consoles having better recording technology, with more recording options and sharing options on PC, etc., that you would see footage from all of these games everywhere on the forums, and it would be super common. And, you'd be seeing people upload countless clips on the platforms like Twitter and YouTube, and I just don't see it. And I'm tuned in on this stuff. I'm part of that algorithm, right? Because that's the type of stuff I look at and search, and I just hardly ever see people really upload footage. I find that weird. It's surprising to me.
It's almost like if you can't be a content creator, you're not bothering doing it, not sharing it just for fun. And I think that attitude is kind of pervasive in a lot of communities these days, certainly in the basketball gaming community, that we've kind of lost that sense of fun and whimsy, that shared experience with other people, sharing what we're doing, talking about how we're playing the games, showing off a cool highlight. It's like I don't have a big enough following to reach anyone, I'm not going to make any money on this content, so why bother sharing it? Because it's fun. I had a response to my recent post about putting Victor Wembanyama in NBA Live 2000 using Face in the Game, posted on our Facebook page, and somebody responded, why bother doing this? Who would do this? And it's like, because it's fun. It's just a fun thing to do. And the same thing goes for sharing highlights. Look at this cool play that I pulled off. Why not share it with all the avenues we have, all the platforms to post it on, social media platforms you can just upload right to there. I know obviously there are limits to length and file size, etc., but those limits are certainly ample to share cool clips. Yeah, I think it's kind of a case of if people can't profit off it, can't get something out of it, clout, money, whatever, they're not bothering to do it. And I think we're less friendly as a community as a result.
Yeah, I'll also point out that I think the people that make comments like that, like, why would you post this? Again, I think that those people are very few far in between. I think that's the minority. I think when people see a post like that, even if they don't comment most of the time, it's like, oh, that's kind of cool. Or
True.
they don't care either way. It's not like a negative reaction. I think that the reason why people don't share as much is maybe because just the internet is too big, and they think that nobody's going to care. And so why would you want to share if you're not going to get any responses? You're going to get disappointed, right? So I think that maybe that's the reason. But I thought that the sharing piece would be booming in 2026, and I'm surprised that it isn't. The next negative is kind of tied into this. So I'm surprised at how often content is controlled by algorithms and who knows who. It is disheartening to see some creators out there who have great talking points and produce great content get completely shut out from having the audience that they deserve. It's often more about who you know and who will promote you rather than the quality of your content. It's about who will push your stuff, not about you being able to show off your own stuff. It's also why so much of the early gameplay footage for new NBA 2K games looks so poor. Because it's not about how well the person can show off the game, not about how great they are as people or promoters either. It's about the audience they have, their name, and how often they are promoted. It's super unfortunate, and I am surprised at how out of control it's gotten.
Well, you know how I feel about that. Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree. So frustrating to feel like your content's being stifled, not being shown to the people who are following you, subscribed to your YouTube channel. You know, it gets disheartening, obviously. And certainly when you're not being a shill, you know, when you're kind of being punished for being truthful, for being honest, for having a balanced and nuanced take. Yeah, algorithms suck.
And my last negative is I'm surprised that the graphics are not more lifelike in the 2K series. I guess I imagined players in basketball video games in 2026 to look more realistic, more lifelike, especially with what we were getting on Xbox One and PlayStation 4. But it feels almost like we plateaued with those consoles. And that surprises me. It's often been said that people don't feel like PS5 gen was a leap. And if it was incredibly small, which is quite different than how most felt about past instances of gaming gens changing. You know, I look at a game like NBA 2K26, Andrew, and I can put it side by side with a game like NBA 2K19. So they're separated by 7 years, right? 8 years. And the close-ups and the textures and whatnot, they look better on NBA 2K19. And you go back and you look at a game like NBA 2K14, which came out almost 13 years ago now, and you look at Xbox One and PS4, and you're like, wow, the lighting looks better, the reflections look better, there's certain things that look better. Why haven't these graphics become more lifelike as the technology advanced and whatnot? So I'm surprised that the player models, the graphics in general and whatnot in the newest games are not more lifelike at this point.
I think plateaued is the perfect way of putting it. I was waiting for you to say that because that's certainly how I feel as well. And with us gaming for decades, going from 8-bit to 16-bit to 32, 64-bit, the early 3D era, PS2, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and obviously the last couple of generations, you know, seeing those big jumps with every generation, we became accustomed to it. Graphics were blowing us away. You know, as much as you and I don't like the phrase, oh, we used to think this looked so good, because it did at the time, that's how it was, is that, oh, graphics can't get any better than this. Oh no, graphics can't get any better than this. Oh no, graphics certainly can't get any better than this. And we've kind of reached that point where, can graphics get any better than this? At least in basketball video games. We know other genres are being more innovative and technologically impressive there. Absolutely. But yeah.
I think that's part of it, by the way. I see other games.
Yes.
That have a lot going on with them, and there's a lot of moving parts on the screen at the same time, and just the graphics are more lifelike. Right? But in basketball video games, we haven't gotten there. And that surprises me. And I am the furthest thing from a graphics snob. You know that, right? I just had a blast playing NBA Live 96 for Super NES, 16-bit, earlier today.
Yeah.
You know, we played NBA Live 10 from PS3. It doesn't look as good as the PS4 gen games, but I still love the look of that game. You know, I go back and play NBA Street Volume 2. I love the look of that game. That game came out over 20 years ago. So I am not a graphic snob. What I'm saying is I am surprised that players don't look more realistic in the basketball video games we're seeing today. That is all I'm saying.
And I'm the same. I'll go back and play some very old games. I'm no graphic snob either. But, there's some faces in NBA Live 10 that I would say are better than some of the faces in NBA 2K26. So, again, not seeing that big jump and comparing to other genres where you are seeing that impressive technology, those impressive graphics, it's hard not to make comparisons. And it's hard not to be surprised that we haven't seen another big jump. And we've kind of touched on it, this last negative that I'll bring up, but changes in the attitude of the community. We talk about defending microtransactions, shutting down constructive criticism. I never want to gatekeep, but the popularity of games has people treating them like other genres, wanting them to have mechanics like fighting games, as you brought up on the show before, Derek, things like that. Used to be if you were jumping online to talk about basketball video games, looking for mods, etc., you were among the most hardcore of hardcore basketball fans and gamers. I don't think that's necessarily the case. That being said, I do want the genre to be welcoming to everybody, but we are seeing that move away from being hardcore basketball fans, I think. And, we've touched on it before, but the attitude towards modding, hoarding information, paywalling mods, encrypting mods, basically doing a lot of things that we criticize AAA publishers for, has been very disappointing to see. I would not have thought that in the early days of our modding community. In the heyday of NBA Live modding, could never have imagined people accepting paid mods. Anytime somebody tried to charge for a mod or a tool back in the day, they were met with a lot of hostility. Now it's kind of the done thing for a lot of people. A lot of people are taking their mods to those platforms and paywalling them. It's been very disheartening to see. I think, once again, it's made us less cohesive, friendly as a community. I would not have expected this 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, modding became more of an economy and less of a fun hobby, right? I think people used to create mods with the intent of, enhancing their own experience, but, sharing the experience with others and legitimately getting enjoyment out of that. Now it feels like the majority of modders are out to make money, and to the point where they will advertise shoddy work, and oftentimes with screenshots that show it in its best light. But when you put, like, for example, a cyberface in the game or a court they created, you realize, oh, wow, this doesn't look like the screenshot, right? There are deceptive practices going on in this scene as well. And, people are making money off of it. And I do think that the modding scene has changed dramatically over the last 10 to 12 years that I've been a part of it. And, it's super unfortunate.
It's just that lack of goodwill. Again, the same thing we criticize publishers for, billion-dollar corporations for, having that lack of goodwill, that lack of fun and whimsy in the basketball gaming community, doing things for fun, sharing clips for fun, making mods for our own personal use, and sharing it with other people because we know that they'd enjoy it too, and fixing things in the games and helping other people improve their gaming experience with those fixes. Yeah, I'd love to get it back. Very hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube, obviously, Derek, at this point. But, yeah, definitely surprising, not for the better.
So let's get to the responses to this week's community question. I asked, what are some aspects of basketball gaming in 2026 that surprise you? And I stated that I was looking for both positive and negative. So T Gentry at Bucky_T responded. His positives are in terms of the 2K series. There's a ton of depth as far as modes. The graphics from 21 to 26 all run similar, even though I like 2K 25, 26, and 21's graphics the best on next gen. For his negatives, he states, no game gave me jaw-dropping excitement, and the lack of games make me play past titles more. That sounds like you, Andrew. Similar to me, too, but very much like you. You haven't had excitement for any of the PS5 gen NBA 2Ks. You haven't been able to spend much time with them at all because the gameplay doesn't get you. And, gameplay is paramount.
Yeah, outside of 2K21 and 2K23, haven't spent a lot of time with games this generation, haven't gripped me, haven't wowed me. Seeing the previews every year, thinking this looks pretty much the same, and then finding out it plays pretty much the same, and that same is something that I don't like very much. So, very unfortunate. Like I said, it'd be interesting to revisit some of these games and see if I warm up to them like I did 7th and 8th gen titles. But I do have to say, Derek, that I'm not too confident that's going to happen.
VF Baller at VF Baller states, one main aspect is that how some 2K releases, 2K14 through 2K17 and 2K19, really replicates players and team tendencies. I honestly haven't seen it done like that since. And yeah, a lot of people have pointed that out, that the AI does not seem as strong in, 2K21 through 2K26. You go back and play games like 2K14 through 2K19, with the exception of 2K18. And oftentimes you see better AI, both on offense and defense. I know that I routinely see the CPU mix it up on 2K19, both on offense and defense, and they can pose one hell of a challenge. And I know that VF Baller has been spending a lot of time with NBA 2K14 PS3 gen lately and just having an absolute blast. He sees, the depth in that gameplay. He really enjoys the game on the sticks and whatnot. But yeah, it does feel like sometimes the AI is just not as good in the newest 2Ks.
Goes back to that focus on the competitive scene rather than being an NBA sim. How many times have we gone back and played a game like NBA 2K10 or NBA 2K9, Derek, and said, wow, look how they're focusing on realism, authenticity, how realistic this game is despite being generations old. We don't have that as much in recent years because of that focus on skill-based mechanics, building the game for the competitive scene rather than the hardcore basketball fan and gamer. Yeah, absolutely agreed.
Andrew at Andrew the X states, positive surprise, animations look good. Negative surprises, everything else feels like it's gone backwards since games' focus went from recreating the sport in a fun and authentic way to maximizing revenue. Presentation strangely worse, and gameplay mechanics as well, no longer pick up and play. And that's one of your biggest problems,
yes,
right? With the PS5 gen games, is you don't feel like they're as pick up and play. And we both talked about it many times on past shows. The gameplay is so catered to the online scene that you feel it in the offline modes. So you're playing, My NBA, or playing Play Now games, etc., and you can feel that online influence on the sticks, and you can feel like that single player control, and then there's so many canned animations, and it's so badge reliant and all of that stuff. I know exactly what he means, and I definitely agree with him.
100%. Yeah. And like you said, you can see the mechanics are designed for the online scene, because when you play against somebody else, they work okay sometimes. But when you're playing against a CPU that can react as fast as a computer can read your inputs, can mimic your movements, counter your movements in a nanosecond, it doesn't work as well. So yeah, once again, focusing on the online scene has just really negatively impacted the sim gameplay offline.
Dasho Pro at Nate Stasho, Live01 legend, friend of the show. He states, I went out for breakfast at a restaurant and couldn't help but notice a child maybe age 8 or 9 with a smartphone watching 2K26 content on TikTok. I only saw a couple seconds and didn't see the context, but it reminded me that children and young adults are 2K's primary target. And it was the same with NBA Live 19. Right? We've talked about this. That was their primary target. It was kids, teens, and young adults. And yeah, that's, a lot of that content that you see on YouTube. I don't have TikTok anymore, but that you would see on TikTok, the stuff that's being promoted on Twitter, the footage and creators they promote, pre-launch, etc. Yeah, he's absolutely right.
Yeah, it does feel like a lot of things, video games included, that were once for all ages, are now being very focused on the youth trends, etc. It does feel very alienating, I will say, as somebody who has aged out of that core demographic, or what is now the core demographic anyway. Yeah, I don't care for it, and it's a shame to see what's happened to one of our favorite genres.
Stephen at the Live King, he states his positive surprise is finally started playing the Rec in 2K26, and it's been surprisingly fun. Not perfect, but you need a 94 or higher to really have fun with it. That's how they get you, though, right, Andrew?
Oh, yeah.
In order to avoid the grind, they have people spending their hard-earned money, and oftentimes their parents' money, to get their player to a higher overall so they can actually have fun with the game. He also stated that one of his positive surprises is the NBA The Run devs actually taking feedback and making quick changes before launch. Yeah, that is something that I've also been pleasantly surprised about. I've spent about 6 to 8 hours playtesting the game, as I stated earlier, and they are really listening to the community, and they're listening for the most part to the right feedback, stuff that will actually improve the game. They've listened to the NLSC podcasts that we've put together about that game and about the play testing. They've taken that feedback to heart. They've even made comments about it, etc. I'm super impressed by Play Studios at this time. Hopefully the game has a strong launch. Hopefully they add offline play later. I'm going to keep on them about that. But yeah, good stuff all around there.
Yeah, considering how we've been given the cold shoulder, not just us, but gamers in general, from developers who don't want to hear feedback about certain things. Don't talk about microtransactions, don't talk about open worlds, just tell us the feedback we want to hear. Yeah, that is definitely a very pleasant surprise. And as far as having to be a 94 overall, that high-rated player for the rec, the other change in the community that has been a negative surprise here, Derek, is how people have jumped on the whole, you're broke if you don't want to pay. Again, defending microtransactions, defending the billion-dollar corporation. Won't somebody think of their profits, Derek? Won't somebody think of the billion-dollar corporation's profits? Calling your fellow gamers broke because you don't want to spend money that you shouldn't have to spend? Ridiculous.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. I also want to point out that if you make your game the best it possibly can be for the consumer, it's going to get received well. It's going to be awesome. But if you're making a game to fuel your own ego or your own egos, your game is going to fail, right? And we had a developer at one point that was talking about his game was going to be better than NBA Jam, actually taking shots at the NBA Jam series and promoting the game. He ghosted us when we asked him for an interview on the show, originally agreed, and then just decided to stop communicating with us. And yeah, what happened with that game, right? You don't even hear about it anymore. I haven't heard anything about it. So he was making that game less for the consumer and more for his own ego. And yeah, that's why he failed, in my opinion.
And look, obviously we do want to see more games on the market, but when he did that to us, when he big leagued us and set up that time to talk to us, I stayed up till 4 a.m, as you recall, Derek, to do that, to accommodate his schedule. And he just ghosted us, didn't even respond. And we're saying, hey, we're ready to go. Where are you? And do you still want to do this? Do you want to reschedule? The fact that he was so unprofessional about that, the fact that he was so arrogant about his game, I'm not upset that it failed. That was karma.
And back then, I was doing the podcasts out in my car.
Yes.
I didn't have a place to do it. And I remember I was doing it in the winter. And I went out into my car, and you and I were waiting, right? And
about an hour.
He ghosted us. Yeah, for a while. And so, in my opinion, the way he handled that, the way I saw the communications going out on social media, I don't think he was making that game for the consumer. I think he was making that game for his own ego. And like I stated, you'll fail that way. Diabetes 2K mod at Diabetes 2K states, hi, do the graphics look good to you? And he's stating that because I said an example of a positive would be the graphics look good or whatever. And I stated to him, you can say the graphics surprise you, but in a negative way as well. And for me, it was a negative, right? For me, I'm surprised that the graphics aren't more realistic in 2026. Coach D at Coach Deadman states, how much detail went into offline gameplay a decade ago, but it's basically ignored today. And that goes back to our point about how you can just feel that the gameplay is tailored to the online scene no matter what game mode you play, right? Whether you're playing offline, whether you're playing online, whether you're playing My Team, whether you're playing Play Now, etc. Like, you can just tell that it's not made for offline play.
It's definitely a recurring theme, isn't it? This dissatisfaction with where the gameplay has gone, the sim gameplay, the offline gameplay being so affected by online play. Yeah, it's not just us saying it. Yeah, a lot of people definitely see the regression. And as far as surprises with graphics in 2026, Derek, I will say that sometimes when we go back to a game, especially with the emulators, upscaled, seeing the textures, it can really pleasantly surprise us how amazing these games actually look when they are maxed out and upscaled, obviously. We spent probably an hour in 2 different sessions going through the faces in NBA Live 2000 and NBA Live 10, just marveling at some of the faces in those games, Derek. And that was pretty fun to do.
Yeah, how about that Ron Artest face in NBA Live 10?
Yeah, perfect.
There's many, many awesome faces. There are awesome cyber faces for the stars in NBA 2K11 for PS2. Like Tracy McGrady, Shaq. It's like they look awesome. Shaq looks better in the PS2 version of NBA 2K11 as far as his likeness than he does in the current NBA 2K, right? In NBA 2K26. So, yeah, some impressive stuff there.
And look, as somebody who was hooked on Ultimate Team in Live 18 and 19 in recent years, until the service went offline, there's a lot of great Legends faces in 18 and 19. I was pleasantly surprised there, too, to see the quality of the faces, because NBA Live's graphics on 8th generation sometimes did feel a half step behind, or a whole generation behind. But they really nailed some of those Legends faces in Live 18 and 19, Derek.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't a huge fan overall of the Ultimate Team gameplay in either Live 18 or Live 19, but I was impressed with some of the Legends faces. So that's it for the responses to this week's community question. Thank you again to the community for weighing in. But yeah, I want more competitors in this space, and I want more memories created at home with these games. I want people to see each other face to face. I want, friends to pull all-nighters, or siblings to pull all-nighters, or parents to enjoy these games with their kids. And I guess if I had to make a couple wishes for basketball gaming in 2027, it would be just that. It would be more games in the space, or more games being worked on to enter the space, and for that offline experience to be valued more.
Wholeheartedly agreed. And this won't surprise you or our listeners, Derek, but I intend to play more classic basketball games, and I want to connect more on NBA Live 10. I think that's going to come back in our rotation, because that was a really fun session.
And I mastered throwing alley-oops. And you are an excellent recipient. So alley-oops are really tough in that game to time, especially throwing them, because you have to wait for the recipient to be pretty damn close to the rim in order for it to be a throwdown. And I think we had like 4 or 5 good ones last game, including one where I was in the post with Dwight Howard and you cut with Vince Carter, and I threw an oop from the post, which you threw down two-handed. So pretty proud of myself that I was able to kind of master alley-oops in a game where it's difficult. But yeah, we made some awesome plays there.
Yeah, and stay tuned for those highlights and more, and everything else we do with our basketball gaming coverage. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. Thank you for tuning in, and a reminder that you can catch us every week on the NLSC, our YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast platforms. Also, both we and the NLSC are on social media, and would appreciate a follow. So Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on YouTube, D43, and on the NLSC, D43.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum, and Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. The NLSC is on X, Facebook, and Blue Sky at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, give a look to the NLSC itself, nba-live.com, for all things basketball gaming. So, thank you again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.